with Rabbi Simon Jacobson, the author of Toward a Meaningful Life. I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself and your own personal story with the Rebbe and how it really lit a fire in you to spread his message and write this book and all that you've been continuously doing.
Well, we're going back many years now to my teenage years. You know, those teenage years. You remember yours?
I'm only 24, so not long ago.
Right. So those teenage years were your formative years, and you're looking, you're seeking, trying to find who you are. And I guess was what you can call a rebel without a cause. I had a lot of energy in me, and I was ideological. I wanted to do something with my life. And I was looking, and I saw a lot of mediocrity and lack of passion and lack of vision and energy in life. Make a long story short, I began being very intrigued by the mystical teachings of Judaism, Kabbalistic and Hasidic teachings. It spoke to my soul. Though I'd grown up in yeshiva and I went through all the Talmudic classes, but Talmud was very technical, very mechanical, very brilliant, but it didn't touch my soul, to be honest. But the Hasidic teaching started to touch, and it was like music to my ears as I related very much to its inner message. And that's what ignited a spark in me, and I began to explore further. And that's when I began to understand. I grew up in Crown Heights, USA, and I began to appreciate and understand that the Rebbe, the Lubavitch Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who was the 7th Chabad Rebbe, was really truly a revolutionary, just dressed in traditional garb, looking to seeking to change the world. And I was very taken by that, because that's what I wanted to be part of, some way of changing the world, you know. Yeah. And I became more involved, and I began to very, very fascinated by these teachings, and I got closer, and I wanted to really have access to the Rebbe. So I began working with a small group of people who would remember and memorize the talks that he delivered on Shabbos and holiday, which were hours and hours of talks, and you had to remember them verbatim and then publish them. So I worked my way up, and by 1979 I became the main writer of these talks. So I had direct access to the Rebbe. I was able to ask him questions, and I took full advantage and exploited the situation as best as I could to ask and provoke, because I felt I have access to such a spiritual master. Let's go for it. And that really, I look back as my whole life, I became a rebel with a cause, and the cause was to create a spiritual revolution, to be honest, a revolution where a change of consciousness, higher the sensitivity and the consciousness of human beings of all walks of life, Jew or non-Jew, observant and unobservant. And over those years in the 80s, I worked a lot extensively, essentially behind closed doors, behind the library walls of research and academia and deeply scholarly writings. But then in the 90s, after the Rebbe had a stroke in 1992 and then passed away in 1994, I went ahead and wrote the book Toward a Meaningful Life, which distilled these teachings in general, the universal Jewish teachings, in a psychological type of personal growth book, which was published by a major publisher, William Morrow. And that began the next stage of my life. In 1995 and on, that book was very successful, reached millions of people, translated to many languages, 13 languages. And that launched my next stage, which was the Meaningful Life Center, an outgrowth of the name of the book, which is what I do now. It's basically bridging the spiritual and the secular and helping people find purpose and meaning in their lives. And I can tell you now, in this pandemic, obviously all this has taken on a whole new dimension, because the people are really vulnerable and receptive, and everyone's looking for some deeper inner stimulation when all your outer lives are disrupted, your work, school, travel plans, entertainment, you name it. So this is, so I've been really on overdrive working on delivering all kinds of programs to help people build their, let's call it spiritual, emotional, psychological immunity, which is equally important as is physical health. That's in a nutshell my life.
I'm curious. Well, first of all, thank you for all that you're doing and sharing it. I'm curious, what kind of questions, you had the fortunate privilege to be so close with the Rebbe. What kind of questions would you ask, and what was it about his nature that would just answer certain ways?
Well, a few key things I would point out. The Rebbe was a very sharp mind and thinker. And, you know, when you're dealing with human condition and human problems, you can look at things on symptomatic level. You look at symptoms. Someone says, I'm depressed, sad, I'm not motivated. And then there's looking at things at the root level, which is what's the root of it all. And the Rebbe was a very, very keen at that. I learned that methodology of cutting through the smoke screens and all the distractions and getting what is the root of an issue. People tell you what they tell you is only the effects it has. It's not the root.
They tell you the solutions.
And once you understand the root, you can advise and interventions that can actually help. Like, for example, for many people, there's symptoms. They maybe have addiction. And I've been doing a few programs on addictions now because quarantine and addiction is unfortunately, they feed each other. So what's the root of addiction is a healthy need for attachment. We all need attachment and love. You don't find it in a healthy way, you start looking in all the unhealthy places or substances or behaviors. So by understanding the root, you can really help people find another alternative way to channel that need. In healthy. It's like a person who's, let's say, very thirsty and desperate, they'll drink poison even. And you want toxins and you want them to drink healthy water. So when you understand the root, you can solve many more issues and do them in a more permanent and lasting way, not a quick fix. That's just one example. And I can go on, different insights and how it's really methodology. It's how to think about challenges, how to look at an issue, not treat, as I said, the symptoms at the root. Empowerment is a big one, empowering people, not to give them the fish, but teach them how to catch fish.
You bring up an excellent point that I kind of was wanted to ask at least later on. However, it's a perfect transition, and it dives into the whole. My question that I'll then preface with is what the Jewish approach that the Rebbe also emphasized to this transformational process, and that includes what kind of tools and practices are taught to be able to increase this self-awareness, increase this understanding of methodology and connecting with Hashem. Because part of the process of transformation requires becoming aware of these familiar habit patterns of the mind and beginning to quote unquote break that habit. And as the Rebbe taught, and you mentioned in the introduction, lifting the veil of modern life, where there's many different veils of illusions we have. For example, and in later in the book, you mention a lot about, we have to define God. And many people have an intellectual understanding of what God is without the emotional kind of experience that you're sharing a little bit. You touched on that the Rebbe not only embodied, but was able to share with you. So therefore, the different habits or ways we have of thinking, because sometimes thinking is a habit of itself, or a habitual pattern of thinking a certain way. And we now have like brain scans and things to show that it's embossed neurologically. So I'm really curious because, what's becoming more and more popular is meditation, because you can get beyond, the body, and you can get beyond thinking habitual ways to really start to notice these different patterns.
Absolutely. Look, we are often a product of our product, or even a victim of circumstances, which also turns us into habitual creatures. We follow habits and patterns, either developed in early age in our homes, in our schools, social pressure, social norms. And once you get into a rut or a pattern or routine, it's very hard to break out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a good pattern, great. But if it's a bad pattern or it's a bad way of thinking, we build deep prejudices and deep stereotypes based on that. And when we know how hard it is to break a habit. So one of the great challenges in any type of growth is to challenge yourself, your mindset. You know, we're prejudiced. We have certain biases. We think about things in ways that are not necessarily always healthy, but it's very hard to change because it's like once you, let's say you're a tennis player and you're just striking the racket the wrong way and become your habit, it's very hard to change that. But with work, you can do that, but you have to recognize that because the first step in all growth is awareness of the problem. Mm-hmm. If you deny there's a problem or you escape from it or you avoid it, you're not going to solve anything. So awareness, key is awareness. And once there's awareness, you can begin to grow and develop new ways of looking at things. You talk about change of consciousness. Look, the idea of a messianic world, the idea of a world of world peace and higher spiritual consciousness is not a fantasy. Every system, whether Jewish or not, every spiritual system, anyone always has dreamt of a better world. Even science dreams of creating a better world, eradicating disease, eradicating pandemics like the one we're facing, the extending life expectancy, building better communications, that we can transcend time and space through technologies and so on. So everybody's looking for a more perfect world. The question is, what means a more perfect world? Is it just simply that you have a faster mobile phone? Or we see now in this life that our external systems are not what defines life. We thought we would never be able to exist without going to work or without our summer plans or without the other security blankets. And now we realize that we're human beings, we're vulnerable, fragile human beings. And what really matters are things like love, your relationships, your value system. What do you want to give to the world? What kind of mark you want to make? So this alone is a consciousness changer because it makes people think differently. Because again, the worst possible thing for growth and excellence is comfort zones. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to be comfortable, but a comfort zone is very nice, but you know what? It doesn't motivate you because then you just stay stuck there. So I see any type of real change in life and revolution comes always through some disruption, through some discomfort. You'll see all the greatest inventions in history usually came through pain, through some loss, some trauma, some challenge. Because, you know, the Talmud puts it this way, the olive does not produce oil until you press it. Yeah. Pressure works. Pressure turns charcoal into diamonds. Pressure creates new innovative ways how to get out of that challenge. Even war, God forbid war, some of the greatest technologies were created around wartime. So thank God we don't have to fight an outer war, but now we're challenged to look for new innovative ways to create inner stimulation, because you can't just get it by going to a restaurant, and you can't just get it by going to a baseball game or whatever it may be. So you have to find it within. And that is a stepping stone to higher consciousness. So when we talk about that, the Rebbe, of course, was major. That was his central theme, to bring the world. But you see, it's often not interpreted. You mentioned God. Yes, many people have an intellectual idea of God, but many people have a distorted view of God. And their God is not the God that we can embrace. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, it's a favorite line of mine. I use it in Torah Meaning for Life. He was a great Hasidic master in the 19th century. He said to a self-proclaimed atheist, he said, the God you don't believe in, I also don't believe in. So if God is some type of guy sitting on a throne in heaven with a long white beard, angry, punitive, and can't wait to punish us for the sins that we do, or strike us with lightning, I would say I'm an atheist if that's the definition of God. So we have to define, what does God mean? However, if you understand God as a far more sublime, a higher reality, the essence of it all, and that connecting to that helps us all become the best we can be. helps you actualize, talked about empowerment, empower you to really become a partner with God, if you wish, and become a partner in transforming this world from a materialistic, selfish, survival of the fittest type of world into a selfless, giving world filled with goodness and kindness and nobility and volunteerism and so much of the beauty that we're seeing now. Then you're talking about that choice is the difference between life and death, is the difference between living a displaced and a dissonant life to living a redemptive life, a life of what we would call geula, of redemption, of a messianic type of life. So it's not as crazy as it sounds. It's basically a vision of a world where there's a total fusion between spirit and matter, between form and function, between the inner and the outer, that our outer lives are reflective of our inner lives, as opposed to the other way around. Many times I ask somebody, you say to somebody, hey, who are you? You know, what makes you, who are you? And they give you their business card. But the business card is not who you are. Your business card is what you do. And I think, again, this pandemic has caused us to start challenging who you are you outside of your job, outside of all your external activities. So that's my longer answer to your short question.
Yeah. So touching on that is, I want to dive into, like you're mentioning, with how people have that understanding of God, and I brought it up a little bit. Even I have, let's say, more on like a, you have the intellectual understanding, but the fear may still be in the body in a sense. So what kind of tools or tools of transcendence are emphasized as practice? Because even if I'm putting on tefillin every day and doing everything, it's not necessarily going to change the way I perceive the world.
Right. That's one of the sad realities of our time, that people have become robotic. You know, I call it mechanical Judaism, like mechanical behavior. Okay, like you just said, put on tefillin, you stick a mezuzah on the door, you don't work on Shabbat, you eat kosher. But if it's mechanical, all you're really going to be doing is the ritual, but you don't understand the spiritual. So, for example, let's take tefillin. Tefillin is a mitzvah that every day a boy after bar mitzvah, after 13, will wrap on his arm and on his head. And many just do it. That's what they were taught. It's cultural, whatever. That's what you do. But when you think about it, everything in life is driven by balance between mind and heart. The tefillin on the head, tefillin right here against your heart, is a type of balance and of mind and heart, that you don't just follow your impulses, your emotional impulses, you reflect on things. So tefillin can become a whole meditative experience of personal refinement and personal growth. So a lot of what I do, and of course I learned a lot from the Rebbe and from in general, that's exactly what the inner dimensions of Torah teach, not just the mechanics. There's mechanics. Yeah. Think of someone playing an instrument, and they don't know how to read notes. They say, okay, what am I supposed to do? I see all these notes, it's gibberish. But then someone who knows how to play, doing the same moves, but it's creating magic. Yeah. So the mechanics have to go hand in hand with the soul of it. It's not just knocking your hands on a piano or the strings of a guitar or a violin. There's a soul to it. So I think everything's body and soul. The body is the mechanic. So Shabbat, okay, not supposed to work on Shabbat, but what's the meaning behind it? Meaning is because it's a day of spirit. It's a day of entering inward. So we try to shut down as many of our external activities, our work, our machines, our phones, because it's not conducive. You want to sit and meditate, or you want to pray or study, or you want to talk to someone you love. You don't want to be checking your texts. You don't want to be getting on a phone and saying, oh, I have a business meeting. So all these we'll call them traditions, have a soul. We talk about exercises, everything. You know, prayer, very often prayer is just lip service. People talk. The truth is that prayer is building emotional intelligence. It's exercising your emotions. That's what it's called. In the Talmud, it calls, what is the service of the heart? Prayer. So instead of just lip service, let's just take one prayer in the morning. The traditional prayer to say Moda'ani. Some of your listeners may be aware of it. What does it mean? We'd say it, I acknowledge, I thank you for returning my soul to me. But if you really think about it, it's a tremendous prayer, because before you begin your day, talk about mindfulness, you're focusing that, who am I? Are you a body or you're a soul? And you say, thank you for returning my soul. It means for giving me purpose, spiritual purpose. And I know that the purpose of my day and my life is to use and express my soul. I'm not just there to function, meaning biological fun, just to eat, drink, sleep, make some money, entertain myself. That's an external level. But I'm here to infuse it all with a deeper sense of awareness and soulfulness. And one short prayer said the right way or meditated upon can change your whole day, can change your whole life, frankly. So if you go through, in general, the Jewish traditions, they're here with us thousands of years. Jews are smart people. They weren't all robotic. I think, unfortunately, over time, things have become mechanical. Like, a monkey could also be taught to put on tefillin. I don't mean to be sarcastic, but my point is that there's intention, what we call kavana.
Yeah.
There's soulfulness. I find, unfortunately, you feel people are very committed to every ritual in Judaism, but they forget to love other people. They're judgmental, they're condescending. That to me is a tremendous dissonance, a tremendous disconnect. You cannot do a mitzvah and not be a more gentler person, a kinder person. So there's this unfortunate dichotomy where people feel they're very devout in eating matzah or making kiddush or doing their technical thing, going to a minyan. But as soon as you say, 1 second, why is it not translating into being a kinder person, a more compassionate? If you love God, don't you love what God loves, which is his people, his children? So you see, so there's a whole need. If you want to create revolution, you can't just be mechanical. You have to bring the soul into it. That's vital. Unfortunately, statistics show that people who are more, they say, the more religious, the less spiritual. The more spiritual, the less religious. What does that tell you? There's a big disconnect. People relate religion to things like tradition, ritual, family, community, law and order, systems, structures. But spirituality is seen as free-spiritedness, energy, music, spreading my wings. And there's a big disconnect. And then the negative elements of religion go into fear, anger, punishment, punitiveness, judgmentalism, condescension. When the truth is, it goes together. It's a fusion, body and soul. A body without a soul, you know what that is? It's called a corpse. It's dead. And a soul without a body is not grounded. So everything needs a fusion of the two. And I think, I go back to this pandemic, this is an opportunity to achieve exactly that, because the outer mechanics have been disrupted. For very religious Jews, they can't go to shul, and there's no minyan. They can't say Kaddish in the regular way. They can't, it's sad in many ways. But on the other hand, it's disrupting a structure to maybe discover that which is beyond the structure.
In order to heal, the pus has to rise, in a sense, to come out of the wound. Yeah.
And sometimes exactly. And that's why sometimes when people are in a very uncomfortable place, painful place, it's the first step toward healing. In Hasidic thought, there's a concept called yesh, ayin, yesh. What does that mean? That for any paradigm shift to happen, you start with a certain paradigm. You need a disruption because you need to shed a layer of skin to assume a new layer of skin. We talked about growth. Mm-hmm. If you have your old prejudices and your old way of thinking, you're never going to grow, because whatever you do is going to be an extension of your past. So I always like to put it this way, that if you think what you thought and you say what you said and you do what you did, you know what you're going to have. What you had. You want change, you need to reaction. You need to do something different if you want different results.
Very nice.
Yeah. I see I silenced you.
Silence is a language of its own.
I agree. Beautiful. Beautiful.
There's so much I would like to go on from there, but I'd really like to dive into a little bit more about the Rebbe And it's a question I had a few weeks ago, and I think I asked a rabbi here, but I'd like to touch a little bit more to help clarify other people's understandings, because they may be intimidated with the Jewish approach with a Rebbe. We write to him, we have photos with him around the home, etc. And how is it really different from other religions? Because the practice looks similar. And even when somebody writes to their person they look up to, enlightened man or woman, they may even have revealed blessings or fortunes come to them. But the way it is explained, from what I've heard, which by the way is very important and can lead to different experiences, seems different. Can you dive into the approach with a Rebbe, and more than just, a Rebbe is like a coach, a teacher, really dive more into it?
Being that we're all subjective human beings, which means we have our prejudices and biases, our blind spots, and our self-interest, frankly, our self-interest. So it's vital to have some objective perspective on life. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the word mentor. Yes, a good word. But in truth, the way we go beyond ourselves is getting an objective perspective. What a Rebbe does that's deeper is that he has a spiritual vision of things. As part of a spiritual vision, it's like looking at a bird's eye view of reality. Due to his selflessness and due to his transparency and lack of ego, which he's worked on, can give you like a very transparent picture of reality. So it's more than just an objective mentor. It's someone that actually has a different spiritual perspective. Most of us are material human beings, and from time to time we have spiritual or transcendent perspectives. Imagine someone who's 24/7 saturated with a spiritual view of things. So when you speak to someone like that, or you get counsel and advice, you're getting a whole different reality. You're getting a vision of that's coming from a different place. So it's the ultimate spiritual master, so to speak. And this is a result of his own selflessness. Not because he's so great, because he's powerful. It's because, on the contrary, he's no agenda of his own. So without that agenda, it allows us to be able to rise and see things in a far more powerful way. Most people we meet in life have an agenda. They have an agenda. It may not be a bad agenda, but still an agenda. That's how I would define it in a nutshell. Yeah.
To begin now diving a little bit more into your book and how the book is structured, to be able to begin living a meaningful life, we really have to define what meaningful means, because it also may be different for different individuals, just like how we may have different activities that bring us a sense of happiness. Could you walk through and define what it really means to live kind of meaningfully through the different sections of your book? You have, man, self, and with God.
Sure, and social. There's a social section.
Social, yeah.
Yeah.
Man, not man, self, man, social, and God.
Right. Yeah. I would say that I would use a business example because it'll make it more credible. Every business cannot function without a mission statement. A mission statement. And a mission statement, by definition, even for a capitalist, profit-driven company, always is about a cause that's greater than any individual. I'll just use an example. Google's mission statement is to organize all the information of the world and make it readily accessible. So there are 120,000 employees, and every innovation that they make, which makes them billions of dollars, is not driven by the line, let's make money. It's serving a need that people have. And since 90% or whatever the amount of their searches that we make yield results, we continue to go back to Google. If the searches went down to 50%, Google would go out of business, or at least definitely lose. So let's apply that to our personal lives. Meaning means it's not about you. It's not about me making money, power, influence, control. It's about how are you going to serve a greater cause, a higher cause than yourself. And that in turn enriches you, because you have now become an ambassador, a servant, a type of a messenger, an agent of some contribution. So the question you have to ask yourself, how am I using my skills and my tools and my resources toward a higher end? That is meaning. It's a sense of mission.
Yeah.
It's a sense of urgency. Look, you're using technology to create this webcast, podcast, whatever you call it, to try to spread a message of hope, a message of direction, guidance, a message of truth. So you're using your skills, your time, your resources. You are doing something meaningful. You could have said, instead of us sitting right here, you could have spent the next hour or whatever playing video games, or just chatting texting around for nonsense. I'm not here to criticize, but that would be called not meaningful. Yeah? I mean, it's fine. It may be meaningful to you for the moment, but to say you're making an impact on people's lives. So it really comes down to that. It comes down to, are you here to serve yourself, or are you here to serve something greater? As soon as it's greater, that's called meaning. That's meaningfulness. I each try to provide tools for people to look at their lives in a new eyes. And whatever it may be, you can be in medicine, you can be in technology, you can be whatever you can be. You are here on a mission, you're here on a calling to spiritualize the corner of your world and make it a little more beautiful, a little more sublime, a little more soulful. Yeah. That's how I would define it, yeah.
But also, it brings up a great point that we were mentioning a little earlier on the kind of process of transformation, and that, like you were saying with olive, it has to go through a pressure. And it says, so do you have any, how would you recommend somebody, like usually it takes some kind of external event to lead somebody to want to transform, to make that transformation? When as another person, as like a Rebbe, in different talks that I have seen on the GEM Foundation and everything, he is a very nice and peaceful nature. He doesn't try and make somebody do something. He, in a sense, he kind of trusts that everyone is in their right timing. But how can we inspire somebody to change purely out of joy and not wanting to have that kind of suffering, in a sense? I don't want to, maybe not suffering, but turbulence.
Well, unfortunately or fortunately, most people make a shift in their lives when there's something uncomfortable, and often it's painful, and grief, a loss, trauma, some form of suffering and pain. We all prefer not that. We all prefer to be able to create change, but it's not easy to do. Because when you're comfortable and you're successful and you're prosperous and nothing is, if I came to you and you were that way, you'd say, I'm fine. What do you want from me? Yeah. I'm fine. Because there's a human tendency to gravitate toward comfort. We're like, I'm fine. You'll see that usually what motivates people is some discomfort. The question is the level of discomfort. It could be just plain, you wake up one morning and say, I'm not doing anything with my life. And I feel frustrated and I feel empty. Or it could be competition. You have a friend or someone else is doing something, and like certain jealousy, healthy form of wanting to show, demonstrate. Or it could be unfortunate pain. Look, this disruption of this pandemic is causing everybody to rethink their lives. But there's been losses, there've been deaths, there's grief. We wish it wasn't that way. So I don't have a magic trick to tell you, here's how you can do it without pain. I do think that some of us are wired to be more motivated to make change, but many are not. Many are not. Many will not change something unless they're forced to. So I just want to wish upon everyone a blessing and prayer that it shouldn't come with tremendous pain. It should come with a minimal amount of. But discomfort is impossible to avoid. Look, you think that a child can grow into an adult without the discomfort and awkwardness of adolescence? It doesn't work that way. You know, they say when a man with money meets a man with experience, the man with experience ends up with the money, and the man with the money ends up with the experience. You know, what that means is you need to make mistakes to be able to grow into something greater. And mistakes are always somewhat painful. Now, we pray and hope that the mistakes, the setbacks, the pain should be minimal, but sometimes it's not. Unfortunately, I deal with many people, and sometimes there's real tragedy, loss of family members, premature deaths. You know, even this COVID-19 has taken lives of people I know, family, friends, people I've grew up with. Very painful to see that suddenly, like this magefa, this epidemic, just came sweeping through. But then there's the other side. There's the sad side. Then there's, okay, so what do we learn from this? And how do we grow? And how do we become better people? Because I'll tell you, the worst possible thing is, in addition to all that loss and grief, we also become miserable and depressed. And that's a secondary damage done by this pandemic, the demoralization of the human spirit. That we cannot allow. No, we can't control events around us, but we can absolutely control our attitudes and how we're going to treat it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we're here. We're talking about that. Because the human spirit is very powerful. But I don't have a quick fix. Press this button and you'll never have pain in your life.
Perhaps that's what the time of Mashiach is like.
Yeah, but Mashiach came after years, thousands of years of a lot of oppression and pain. Came with heavy prices. You know, we lost a lot of people. Terrible, the Holocaust. I mean, it came at a heavy price. But you know what? That's what life is about. Life is never meant to be easy. Life is a challenge.
Rabbi, bring up an excellent point. And with these different unfortunate experiences, whether a loss of a loved one or whatever the traumatic experience may be, a big part of it is your perception of the approach. How do you define the experience? So we were also talking about transformation. You're getting beyond the self. So a lot in response to many situations like that, even if somebody has a good practice of prayer or meditation, the response may be, how could this happen to me? You know, I am in pain. But it's how do you practice or teach your different clients, or with different videos that you share with different people, the ability to take the whatever experience you have, whatever sensations, and look at them objectively, so that it's not I'm sad, it's I feel sad right now. Because if I'm sad, that if I identify with that, even for a little bit part of the day, then I'm sad, then it might, lead me not to do any action. But if I feel sad, okay, feelings come and go, thoughts arise and pass away. So I'm really interested in how do you help? That's a practice that takes time, but that's really getting beyond the self. How did the Rebbe really teach that, to be able to get beyond that? To be able to look at the experiences, sensations in a more objective as possible way.
Now, there's a famous expression, trach gut wird sein gut. Think good and it will be good. And many people think it's some type of, nice bumper sticker cliche. It actually isn't. There's a thing called positive psychology, which became popular last years. It's all based on that. It's based on the principle that whenever anything happens to you, you could either focus on the negative and usually be brought down and demoralized, be disoriented, or you can focus on the positive, which is saying, I don't know why this happened, but how am I going to dig deeper? And I'm not going to allow myself to sink. And we have evidence of real effect, physical and physiological and psychosomatic effect on the human being when you think positively. I'll just give you an example. If, God forbid, somebody's in a hospital, and nobody should be in a hospital, and they have visitors, and they have guests, and they have cards and balloons, and people calling them, and then contrast that with another person lying across the room, no one visiting, no one caring, no one calling. I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist to know that the first person has much more chances of surviving. Why? Because he has friends. There's a support, which builds willpower. You want to fight, which in turn affects your immune system. Ask any doctor.
Yeah.
It does. We are not just physical machines. We need spirit. We need hope. We need belief. So the second person, unfortunately, is going to give up in many cases. Say, no one, I'm all alone. No one cares. And that mindset debilitates and definitely amplifies the illness. So this isn't try good, this think good and be good is not just some line. Yeah. It's about accessing the positive energy, it's accessing your inner immune system, your willpower, your inner resources and strengths to fight. It's like adrenaline. Adrenaline makes you stronger, makes you more motivated. So that's the general attitude. Second, which includes several things. First of all, to think that way. Second of all, have friends. Because sometimes the fact is we're all going to be down. And it's very hard to pull yourself out. They say a person who's tied up in ropes can't free themselves. You have to throw them a lifeline. So having friends, having support systems, people we can lean on. And third thing, finally, I would suggest is study about your soul. Get to know your soul. We know our body so well, and when we need our soul, we don't know much about it. It's like you need to get to know, just like you need to exercise your body to get your muscles going, you need to exercise your soul, which is getting to know yourself, getting to know you have more strengths than you think you have. You have more potential than you think you have. Mm-hmm. And with that type of attitude, listen, God still runs the show. I'm not going to say there's no, again, magic, but you have a much more fighting chance. And I'd add one more thing, since I'm on a roll, a fourth thing, serve others. I mentioned before, serve. Don't allow yourself to just sit around and say, why did this happen and what's going to be, and watch the news and hear all the negative forecasts. Do things. Get on the phone, get online, call someone, volunteer to help. When you show love, you get love. That's how it works. When you show goodness to others, it brings goodness into your life. Yeah. It's a fact. It's a fact. It strengthens you. It's so easy now to people just lay in bed, in quarantine, nowhere to go, no job, maybe I'll be laid off tomorrow. Those thoughts do not make for a healthier person.
I like the added parts you added with that, because thinking good is one part of it, but you also, there are many people, I feel, and even myself at one point, where I would think positively, but the state of being was still in a limited kind of way.
Right.
So it's
no, you need to
you really have to gradually move into a state of being where you're not just thinking positively, but you are positive.
Absolutely. Look, it's like a war. You have to fight on all fronts. You can't just do one thing. You got to attack it from every possible way.
Mm-hmm. Well, Rabbi, I really appreciate all the words of wisdom and questions. My questions you've been so grateful to answer. I'd love to, for the last few minutes, since we're in the counting of the Omer, could you share a few insights about the counting of the Omer? What does it mean what's so special or what's so significant about counting? And also what's so significant about the Omer as a wave offering, as Hashem commanded through Moshe?
Right. So you may be familiar, I did a book called The Spiritual Guide to Counting the Omer. If you're not, I'm telling you, I'll tell your audience. You mentioned the Omer app, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, yeah, great.
I've been, the past 3 years, so I had an experience, a concussion that it happened around the Omer time, about 3 years ago. And I would begin journaling on the Omer, the different counting of the days, and attribute it kind of as my own personal exile from Egypt. And then I have kept a journal from each, like looking at what I was writing back then to now. And so,
how you're good. You.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so grateful for it.
Beautiful to hear. Well, the Omar counting, like we spoke earlier, there's the mechanical side to it, and there's the emotional and spiritual side.
Mm-hmm.
The mechanical side is after the bringing of the second day of Passover. The Torah commands that Jews should begin counting till Shavuos, 49 days, 7 times 7, 7 weeks, 7 days each week, until they come to the 50th day, when they will receive the Torah and celebrate Shavuos. Some say it's part of the anticipation the Jews had when they left Egypt, counting down to Sinai. But there's always a deeper spiritual element to it.
Mm-hmm.
Counting is more than just counting. The word Hebrew counting means to count, but it also means to tell a story. Sipur is a story. It also comes from the word sapphire, a beautiful stone. So it's like transparency. So counting is about being deliberate, by being specific. Today's a day. Each day has its corresponding emotional attribute, which you'll find in the prayer book. Chesed of chesed, love of love, discipline of chesed. That's why I wrote the book. You can find it easily online. You can find the free Omer app, my Omer app. Every day has its thought, its meditation, and exercise. And what is it? It's looking deeper into what's the story of your soul? You're counting to tell the story and illuminating that particular dimension of your emotional psyche. To just use an example. Some people are very giving. They're good. They love well. That's chesed. But they don't know when to stop loving. They can spoil someone. They can overwhelm them with their love. So we have gvura of chesed, which says, one second, you need to discipline your love.
Yeah.
It has to have discretion. There are people the opposite. They have a lot of gvura. They're very disciplined and very severe, but they're not showing enough love and compassion. Within parents, parents can suffer from this. So all of us have 7 general emotions. They are love, discipline, compassion, endurance, yielding or humility, bonding, and dignity. This includes all human emotions. Each one of them breaks into another 7. The love of love, the discipline of love, the compassion of love, the endurance of love, the humility of love, the bonding of love, and the dignity of love. So when you go through the 49 days, you're actually going through a very powerful, rigorous evaluation, soul searching of who are you? And defining, here are your strengths that you can improve on, that you can build further. Here are your weaknesses that you can improve on or tame or readjust. It's just like a doctor gives you a diagnosis or an x-ray of your body, the Omer gives you an x-ray and diagnosis of your soul.
Cool.
That's the bottom line, yeah.
I love it. And I love how you also have different journal entries in there, because it's
personal, yeah.
No, exactly. How do I take, today we're Yesod Shebehod, and the different meditations, the different journals, how do I bring it and even begin to think about, my foundation, the foundation of humility. So it's one, I made a video on how I began this kind of journaling, and it's also really cool to look back and see, which week, which emotional attribute did I perhaps have the most, challenges or unpleasant situations.
Exactly. Exactly. It's all about introspection, where a person sees themselves in a deeper way and is able to refine and look at themselves. Hod of Yesod, right?
Today, Yesod of Hod.
Yesod of Hod, I'm sorry, yes, because yesterday was Lag B'Omer, right? I'm looking right now. You have it in front of you, the app?
I have it on my phone, but I'm also currently using the phone to record, so I can't get out of that.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm looking myself here. Okay. So here's what I've written about it. Humility should not be a lonely experience. It ought to result in deep bonding and commitment. There is no stronger bond than one that comes out of humility. Does my humility separate me from others or brings us close? Does my humility produce results, long-term results? Does it create an everlasting foundation upon which I and others can rely and build? So Yesod of Hod is ensuring that our humility is powerful and foundational. Like, use your humility to build something lasting. So without Yesod, humility can sometimes be weak, that you yield and you allow others to do what they have to do, but it's not really building something in your life. That would be the way I would interpret it quickly. So every one of them is beautiful in the way it, yeah.
Definitely, and over time you see how it relates in your own life. Like I was sharing earlier, the ability to look at experiences in your life in an objective manner. When I first started journaling just how I'd been feeling, like based on that corresponding day, a lot of what I'd written was subjective, me, my, why did this happen kind of to me. But then now it's like when I write now, it's a lot more objective. This was a wonderful experience, or it led to this. I can see things in a greater perspective. So again, thank you for creating an app that I'm sure is highly downloaded in the experience we're all going through now. To conclude, I'd really like to acknowledge and appreciate you for all the work that you've done in sharing the Rebbe's message and being able to take his message, which he accurately explained to the world, and you have brought it even more to young adults like myself with your book and with the app and all the work you're doing with Meaningful Life Center. So Rabbi, thank you, and thank you very much for coming on this show. I really, really appreciate it. It's an honor to speak with individuals and leaders like yourself.
Well, Solomon, thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this. And may it get out there, and we're here, as I said, agents of change that will bring a higher spiritual consciousness. Mm-hmm. Thank you for your good questions, very engaging, and God bless you.